Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We spend so much time looking up at the stars, wondering what's out there, that we completely forget we have an incomprehensible, terrifying, and just straight up alien world right here on Earth. I'm talking about our own oceans. They cover more than 70% of our planet, right? Yet they remain this dark, massive frontier filled with documented anomalies, impossible physics, and some seriously terrifying encounters. So today, we are officially opening the case files on the most disturbing events ever recorded in the deep ocean.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To make sense of all these vast mysteries, we're going to break today's explainer down into four distinct case files: ghostly disappearances at sea, unidentified submerged objects, anomalies on the seafloor, and finally, deep sea terrors. First up, Case File 1, Ghostly Disappearances at Sea. Now, the ocean has always claimed ships, right? That's nothing new. But some of these losses just completely defy logic. They leave behind clues that are honestly way more terrifying than a simple sinking. Think about this. Why would 25 people abandon a ship that could literally never sink? That's the huge question at the center of the MV Joyita mystery. This ship set out for what was supposed to be a quick 2-day voyage to Tokelau with 25 people aboard, but it never arrived. The initial search was called off. Fast forward 5 weeks later, and the Joyita is found drifting roughly 600 meters off its original course. It's tilted, it's partially flooded, but the deck itself is totally intact. There was food and water on board to last for months, but no people, no logbook. The only things left behind were medical bandages soaked in blood just sitting on the deck and a radio tuned to the international distress frequency. But here's the absolute kicker, the detail that makes this whole thing so baffling. The ship's engine room was lined with cork insulation. It was practically unsinkable. Anyone with an ounce of sailing experience would know this. So, why on earth would 25 people voluntarily abandon a vessel that was absolutely never going to pull them under? And these mysteries aren't just limited to the water itself. They extend right up into the skies above it. Back in 1978, a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich was flying what should have been a super routine route over the Bass Strait, right between mainland Australia and Tasmania. So he's halfway through the flight, and he radios air traffic control to ask about another aircraft he's seeing. ATC checks, and they tell him there's absolutely nothing on their radar. But Valentich insists. He reports this large, fast-moving object with a shiny metallic surface that just keeps passing over him at a really low altitude. Then suddenly, he tells them his engine is running rough. And then, a long metallic scraping sound broadcast over the radio, followed by dead silence. Search teams scoured the whole strait. They found no wreckage, no fuel slick, no body. Actually, scratch that, they found absolutely nothing. So the crucial point is really his final, chilling transmission. His last coherent words were literally, "It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft." Now, the official theory suggests what's called a graveyard spiral. Basically the idea that Valentich became spatially disoriented over the dark water, maybe mistook the planet Venus or his own lights for another craft, and spiraled into the ocean so fast it wouldn't leave recoverable wreckage. But that official theory conveniently ignores a massive variable. Multiple witnesses on the ground that exact night reported seeing a really weird green light moving over the strait. In the end, the Australian Department of Transport wrapped up their investigation and officially listed the cause of his disappearance as simply unknown. Moving on to Case File 2, Unidentified Submerged Objects, or USOs. Now, we have to get one thing straight here. We're not talking about vague, fuzzy reports from untrained observers. These specific encounters involve highly trained military personnel, top-tier advanced radar, and objects that leave official channels scratching their heads. For example, during a 1963 U.S. Navy military exercise near the Puerto Rico Trench, multiple sonar operators, across several different ships, mind you, tracked a USO. And this thing was moving at roughly 150 knots underwater. To put that into perspective for you, the absolute top-of-the-line nuclear submarines of that era maxed out at around 20, maybe 25 knots. Honestly, even today, there is no publicly known submarine that even comes close to hitting 150 knots. It's a complete physical impossibility for our current engineering. But, it wasn't even just the speed that was crazy. This same object was tracked rapidly descending to 27,000 feet. At that kind of depth, the water pressure is a mind-bending 12,000 pounds per square inch. Just try to picture this. Imagine a fully grown African bull elephant trying to balance its entire body weight on a single coin. That is the kind of extreme environment this object was just effortlessly maneuvering through. And because it was being tracked by multiple sonar systems on multiple vessels all at the exact same time, it couldn't just be brushed off as some random equipment glitch. Just 4 years later, in 1967, things got even weirder up in the tiny fishing village of Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia. Multiple witnesses stood there and watched a large object, lined with a row of flashing bright lights, descend at a steep angle and smack right into the ocean with a massive, loud impact. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and local fishing boats rushed out to the site, obviously expecting to find a downed airplane. But when they got there, no wreckage, none at all. Just this weird patch of glowing yellow foam sitting right there on the surface of the water. The mystery actually got so intense that the Royal Canadian Navy sent divers down to search the seafloor, and they found absolutely nothing. Declassified government files later confirmed that this huge investigation definitely happened, and the object was formally, officially labeled as unidentified. And then, of course, we have the totally infamous 2004 USS Nimitz encounter. So the cruiser USS Princeton had been tracking these really unusual radar contacts off the coast of Southern California for 2 solid weeks. When Navy fighter pilots, including Commander David Fravor, finally went out to investigate, they didn't just see something up in the sky. Fravor looked down and saw an area of the ocean, literally the size of a Boeing 737, churning and frothing white. It looked like the water was boiling from somewhere deep below. And hovering erratically right over this disturbed boiling water was a 40-foot, stark white, wingless object with absolutely no visible means of propulsion. When Fravor moved his jet in to intercept it, the object just accelerated away at a speed that totally breaks the known laws of physics. Oh, and the second it left, that boiling water down below completely vanished. Like it was never even there. Let's move to Case File 3, Anomalies on the Seafloor, and see how this all builds. You see, it's not just bizarre objects zipping through the water that defy explanation. Sometimes it's what's sitting perfectly silent at the very bottom of the ocean, 9,500. That is a number that could literally rewrite human history. Back in 2001, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was just doing a routine scan for pollution in the Gulf of Khambhat. But 130 feet underwater, their sonar suddenly revealed these massive, organized structures stretching for miles. We're talking about look like actual walls and distinct city layouts. So they dredged the area and pulled up pottery fragments, carved pieces, and even human bones and teeth. When they carbon dated those materials, they came back at approximately 9,500 years old. If that's accurate, these underwater structures predate the earliest known urban settlements in Mesopotamia. Now, sure, some geologists argue the formations could just be natural, but here's the thing. No formal excavation has ever been done. They just sit down there in the dark, waiting. A decade later, the Ocean X exploration team stumbled onto something equally bizarre over in the Baltic Sea. Their sonar revealed this massive circular object, roughly the length of 4 city buses, with these raised edges and a totally flattened top. And right behind it, a 300-meter drag track, looking exactly like this thing had violently skidded across the seafloor. Now, the main safe theory, based on some surface samples, is that it's just a natural glacial rock deposit shaped by moving ice. Okay, fair enough, but that natural theory completely fails to explain what happened next. Whenever human divers actually approached the object, their electronic devices started to completely freak out and malfunction. We're talking cameras cutting out, satellite phones just dying. And the moment they swam away from it, everything instantly turned back on. To this very day, the Baltic Sea Anomaly has never been fully excavated. Finally, we're opening Case File 4, Deep Sea Terrors. Sometimes the most disturbing things in the ocean aren't vanished ships or ancient sunken ruins. Sometimes it's acoustic phenomena and biological nightmares that actively live in the deep. Take the fall of 2016, for example. Inuit hunters up in the incredibly remote Fury and Hecla Strait in Canada started reporting this repeating, consistent pinging or humming sound coming from right beneath the ice. And this wasn't just some weird curiosity. It was actively terrifying the local ecosystem. Normally, that area is just packed with seals and whales, but they completely vanished. They fled the area as if some massive apex predator had just moved in. It got so bad, the Canadian military actually sent out aircraft and naval vessels to investigate. They looked into everything, mining operations, military submarine sonar, natural seafloor shifts, you name it. But every single theory failed to produce any evidence. Eventually, the pinging just stopped on its own, and its source remains entirely unknown. But hey, sometimes the predators down there are very, very real. Meet the Humboldt squids. Locals actually call them Diablos rojos, which translates to red devils, and for good reason. These creatures can grow up to 6 feet long and weigh in at 110 pounds. But the scariest part? They don't hunt alone. They swarm in groups of hundreds, sometimes even thousands, and they flash this deep, bright red across their entire bodies in an instant just to communicate with each other. Working together, they'll literally corral their prey toward a central point and then attack using sharp beaks and these powerful suckers lined with serrated, tooth-like edges. But what's truly terrifying is how they interact with us. Divers have reported being aggressively grabbed, pulled downward, and dragged completely away from their boats by these swarms. And their territory? It's expanding further and further north every single year.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is I want you to put yourself in this moment of sheer, absolute psychological terror. The date is January 23, 1960. Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh are crammed inside the Trieste. It's this tiny craft descending into the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest known point on planet Earth. Partway down into the pitch-black abyss, a sharp, incredibly loud bang violently shakes their entire vessel. After frantically checking their instruments, they realize exactly what happened. One of their outer plexiglass viewing windows had literally cracked under the immense, crushing pressure of the deep ocean.
1,100. That is how many times greater the pressure is down there compared to just standing right here on land. They were descending into a totally unforgiving void where the sheer weight of the water above them was trying to crush them into absolute nothingness. And their window had just cracked. Yet in an act of what I can only describe as unbelievable bravery or, maybe just pure madness, they looked at each other and decided not to turn back. They actually continued their descent and successfully became the very first humans to touch the absolute bottom of the world. All of this leaves us with one pretty major final thought. We have literally mapped the surfaces of other planets in our solar system, yet the deepest parts of our very own world remain this dark, crushing void full of documented anomalies. Seriously, if our oceans can hide massive ancient structures, if they can host objects that completely shatter our understanding of modern physics, and conceal aggressive swarms of highly coordinated predators, what else is waiting down there in the dark? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.